The gavel of an auctioneer's hammer cracked against the podium, and Marcus Webb raised his hand for the last time that afternoon. $200. Nobody else bid. Potter and... Nobody else wanted the wreck sitting on the trailer at the edge of the lot. A decommissioned patrol boat so rusted and stripped that the county had listed it as scrap value only. The hull was streaked with rust bleeding down from a dozen wounds in the metal. Salt had eaten through half the deck fittings. It looked like something that should have been cut up for parts a decade ago. Behind him, a woman in a cream blazer laughed loud enough for the whole lot to hear. Diane Castellano owned the marina 3 miles down the coast road, the nicest one in the county, the one with the heated docks and the valet for boat trailers. She had come to the auction looking for a project tender for one of her clients, and instead, she had found something far more entertaining. $200, she repeated, like the number itself was the joke. For that, she's not even a boat anymore, honey. She's a liability with a hull number. Marcus did not turn around right away. He finished signing the transfer paperwork, folded the receipt, and put it in his jacket pocket. Then he looked at her. "I know what she is," he said. Diane smiled the way people smile when they think they've won something. "Well, good luck getting her off my dock, because if that thing so much as scrapes against my pilings, I'm billing you for the paint." "She's not going anywhere near your marina," Marcus said. "I've got a truck." If you have ever been counted out by somebody who never once got their hands dirty, if you have ever had your quiet competence mistaken for weakness by somebody standing on a pile of money instead of ability, then stay with this one until the end. Because 60 days after that laugh at the auction lot, a phone call came through to Marcus Webb's modest little garage. That would change the ending of this story in a way nobody standing in that lot could have imagined. Least of all, Diane Castellano. Marcus Webb was 39 years old and had spent 18 of those years as a Navy electronics technician, the kind of job that never made the newsreels but kept every radar screen, every sonar ping, every encrypted signal running on ships most people never heard of. He had left the service 4 years earlier when his wife died because a 9-year-old daughter needed a father who came home every night, not one who was 6 months out on deployment. Since then, he had run a small repair shop out of a converted garage behind his house, fixing marine electronics, for anyone who could pay and plenty who could not. He was not rich. He was not trying to be. He drove a truck with 240,000 miles on it, and he coached his daughter Ellie's swim team on Tuesday evenings, and he had exactly enough money saved to make sure she never had to think twice about new shoes. The $200 for the boat had come out of an envelope in his sock drawer labeled, in his own handwriting, "Dumb Ideas Fund." He had seen the auction listing 3 weeks earlier. A retired Coast Guard adjacent patrol vessel, 41 feet, hull compromised, electronics gutted per standard decommissioning protocol, sold as is, where is. The photos showed exactly what the county described. A dead boat. But Marcus had spent enough years around naval hulls to notice something in the fourth photograph that the county appraiser clearly had not. A housing bolted into the aft electronics bay, half hidden behind a stripped console that did not match the rest of the gutted interior. It was a shape he recognized, not because it was labeled, because he had installed things like it with his own hands on ships whose names were still redacted in his old service file. He did not say anything about that at the auction. He did not need to. He simply paid the $200, hooked the trailer to his truck, and hauled the boat home past the marina Diane Castellano owned, close enough that she could watch it go by from her office window. Getting the hull into his side yard took most of the first day. Marcus built a proper cradle out of treated lumber and steel jackstands because a boat that size, even a wreck, could kill a man if it shifted wrong. He worked the way he always worked, methodically. No wasted motion. He measured twice on everything, even things that did not need measuring twice, because that was simply how his hands had been trained to move for 2 decades. Ellie came out after school that first day, backpack still on, and stood at the edge of the yard looking at the thing like it was a beached whale. "Is that ours now?" she asked. "That's ours now," Marcus said. "It's ugly." "It's honest," Marcus said. "That's better than pretty, most days." She considered this with the seriousness only a 9-year-old can bring to a sentence like that. then went inside to start her homework, satisfied that her father had, once again, said something that sounded like a rule she should remember. The first 10 days were demolition. Marcus stripped the rotted decking, cut out sections of hull plate too far gone to save, cataloged every fastener, and fitting in a notebook the way he had been trained to catalog components on active systems, because you never knew what you would need again, and undocumented work was how ships died at sea. 1. He found rod in places the auction photos hadn't shown. He found a fuel line that had been left half-connected, which explained some of the smell. He found, tucked behind the aft bulkhead, wiring bundles wrapped in a specific color-coded sheathing that was not standard commercial marine wire. It was mil-spec, military specification. The kind of shielded cable used to carry signal without interference from every other system fighting for space on a hull. He did not rush toward the housing he had noticed in the photographs. He worked toward it the way he worked toward everything, in order, checking what came before it first, because impatience was how people got hurt, or how people missed the thing that actually mattered while chasing the thing that looked exciting. On day 14, he reached it. The housing was bolted to a reinforced mounting plate that had been fiberglassed over at some point, badly, as though somebody wanted it hidden rather than protected. Marcus worked the resin free with a heat gun and a scraper patient, uncomplaining, the way he had once worked a corroded connector loose on a submarine tender in the middle of the night because a comms officer needed it working before sunrise. Underneath the resin was a matte gray casing with a manufacturer's plate that had been deliberately ground down, not corroded. Ground down with tool marks by somebody who wanted the identifying information gone. Marcus sat back on his heels and looked at it for a long moment. He had seen equipment stripped like this exactly once before, on a vessel being decommissioned under classified disposal protocol, where certain systems were supposed to be physically destroyed rather than simply removed, specifically because they were not meant to end up anywhere a scrapper or a collector or a foreign buyer could find them. Somebody had skipped a step. Somebody, years ago, doing the decommissioning paperwork on this exact hull, had marked a box as complete without actually completing it. He did not touch the housing again that day. He photographed it from 6 angles, logged the position, the mounting hardware, the ground-down plate, and went inside to make dinner for his daughter, because that was the order operations happened in his house. Work first, but family never waited on work for long. That night, after Ellie was asleep, he sat at his kitchen table with his old service laptop and looked up the classification protocols he remembered from his time in uniform, the ones governing sensitive systems and their disposal. He was fairly certain about what he had found. He wanted to be more than fairly certain before he did anything else. He called Rosa Delgado the next morning. Rosa had been his line supervisor for 6 years in the service, a chief warrant officer who had since retired into a defense contracting consulting role and who still, occasionally, picked up the phone when Marcus called, because they had spent too many long nights keeping other people's ships running to stop being straight with each other now. "I found something," he told her. "I need a second set of eyes before I do anything stupid." Rosa did not ask him to explain over the phone. That alone told him how seriously to take what he suspected. She drove up 2 days later on a Saturday, looked at the housing for 11 minutes without saying a word, took her own photographs, and then sat down on an overturned bucket in Marcus's side yard and exhaled slowly. "You know what this is," she said. "It wasn't a question. I have a guess," Marcus said. "I'd rather you say it first." "It's a Merlin-class integrated array housing," Rosa said. "Or it was. They only built a handful of these before the program got folded into something else, and every unit was supposed to be destroyed on decommission. I heard 2 units went unaccounted for after a base consolidation 8 years back. Everybody assumed scrapping error, melted down with the rest of the hull cuttings." Marcus said nothing for a moment. "This is one of them," he said finally. Rosa looked at him. "This isn't dumb ideas. Fun territory anymore, Marcus. This is called somebody official territory. Today, not next week." "I know," Marcus said. He had already known, in the honest part of himself, since the moment he saw the ground-down plate. He had simply wanted somebody who had spent enough years reading equipment casings for a living to confirm what his instincts were already telling him, because Marcus Webb did not act on instinct alone when the stakes were this size. He acted on confirmed fact, checked twice, the same way he checked a torque spec twice before signing off on it. That afternoon, he placed a call to the Naval Sea Systems Command, Disposal and Compliance Office. The number Rosa had given him from her own contacts, the one that skipped past the general public switchboard entirely. He did not lead with excitement. He led with facts. My name is Marcus Webb, former electronics technician. Honorable discharge, service number available on request. I purchased a decommissioned patrol vessel through a county surplus auction. During restoration, I discovered an integrated electronics housing that appears to match specifications for equipment that should have been destroyed under classified disposal protocol. I am reporting this through appropriate channels, and I am not moving or altering the unit further pending your instruction. There was a pause on the other end of the line long enough that Marcus wondered if the call had dropped, tense. Then a different voice came on, crisper, more careful. Can you hold for a transfer, sir? He held. It took 4 minutes to reach somebody who identified themselves only as Commander Alvarez, and it took Alvarez roughly 90 seconds of Marcus's description before his tone changed entirely, from procedural to focused. Do not touch the housing. Again, Alvarez said, do not photograph it further and do not discuss it with anyone outside your household. We will have a team at your address within 48 hours. They arrived in 31. 2 technicians and a civilian oversight officer named Patricia Hale came up the driveway in an unmarked sedan and a rented panel van, and Marcus watched them approach his side yard with the same careful procedural stillness he remembered from his own years handling sensitive equipment. They did not rush. They photographed everything before touching anything. They asked him politely but precisely to walk them through exactly what he had done since the day he bought the boat, in order, with dates. He had the notebook ready, every fastener cataloged, every date logged, every photograph time-stamped. Patricia Hale flipped through the notebook slowly, and something in her expression shifted from professional neutrality into something closer to respect. You logged all of this before you knew what it was, she said. I log everything, Marcus said. It's how I was trained. She looked at him for a moment longer than the question required. It took the team 6 hours to confirm what Rosa had already suspected. The housing was, in fact, one of 2 Merlin-class integrated arrays reported destroyed under a decommissioning contract 8 years prior, a contract that, it would later come out, had been closed out on paperwork alone by a disposal subcontractor looking to cut corners and save on demolition costs. The unit had been quietly parted onto this hull instead of scrapped, likely to save time, likely never expected to surface again, buried under fiberglass and a stripped-down commercial resale designation that erased its history entirely. The technology inside, once tested, still functioned. Improved storage humidity in the sealed housing, oddly enough, had preserved most of the internal components far better than anyone expected. It was not simply intact. It was, according to the assessment that came back to Marcus 2 weeks later through Patricia Hale, functionally superior to anything currently fielded in that signal class, because the program it came from had been quietly folded into newer research that had never actually caught up to what this array could already do. Marcus was not arrested. He was not accused of anything. Everyone involved understood quickly that he had done exactly what he was supposed to do the moment he suspected what he was looking at. But there was a problem, and it was not a small one. The $200 bill of sale Marcus held made him, legally, the owner of the vessel, and everything physically attached to it at time of sale, since the county's own paperwork had certified the boat as fully stripped of sensitive equipment prior to auction. The Navy's own disposal contractor had lied on a federal disposal certification form. That lie, ironically, was the very thing that made the housing legally Marcus's property now. It took 11 days of internal Navy legal review to sort through what that actually meant. Days during which Marcus kept working his ordinary jobs, kept coaching Ellie's swim practice, kept living exactly the life he had been living before any of this happened. Because worrying about a number he could not control was not a use of his time he was willing to make. Then Patricia Hale called him personally. We'd like to discuss acquisition of the unit, she said. Formally, there's a process for this. It is not a small process, and it is not a small number. Marcus sat down at his kitchen table before she continued. The final figure that came out of negotiation after appraisal by 3 independent defense evaluators and a formal offer from Naval Sea Systems Command was $18 million, structured as an outright technology acquisition payment, plus a smaller ongoing consulting retainer. Because the Navy wanted Marcus available to answer questions about the physical condition and restoration of the unit going forward, Marcus read the offer letter 4 times before he said anything to anyone. The first time, he read it for the number, because that was human, and he was allowed that much. The second time, he read it for the terms, because numbers meant nothing if the terms took the meaning back out of them. The third time, he read it looking for anything that would obligate him to something he did not want, some clause tying his silence or his future work to conditions that would make him somebody's employee in every way but name. The fourth time, he read it simply to be sure, because $18 million was the kind of number that could make a careful man stop being careful, and Marcus Webb had not stayed alive on active naval systems for 18 years by stopping being careful, the one time it mattered most. Then he signed it, in the same steady, unhurried hand he used for everything, and drove to the bank the next morning before he told a single other soul. He told Ellie that night at the kitchen table over spaghetti. In plain words, because that was how he told her everything. "That old boat in the yard," he said. "Remember how I said she was honest instead of pretty?" Ellie nodded, twirling pasta onto her fork. "Turns out, honest was worth a lot more than anybody thought," Marcus said. "We're going to be okay for a long time, Ellie, really okay." Ellie considered this the way she considered most of her father's pronouncements, with total seriousness, and then asked the only question that mattered to a 9-year-old. "Does that mean I can get a dog now?" Marcus laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in weeks. "Yeah," he said, "I think we can get a dog now." News of the sale did not stay quiet for long, not in a coastal county where marina gossip traveled faster than weather. Within a month, the story of the $200 boat and the $18 million radar had made its way through every dock and boat club within 50 miles, and it eventually made its way, as it was always going to, back to Diane Castellano. She heard it first from a client standing at the fuel dock who mentioned it the way people mention things they assume you'll find as amusing as they do. "You believe that, Diane? That wreck you laughed at? Guy sold whatever was inside it to the Navy for $18 million. Diane did not laugh that time. She went back to her office, pulled up county auction records and confirmed it herself, line by line, the way a woman does when she is hoping very hard to find a mistake and finding none. The marina Diane owned, Castellano Point Marina, was not, in fact, the flush operation its heated docks and valet trailer parking suggested. She had leveraged nearly everything to complete a renovation 2 years earlier, betting on a wave of luxury boat traffic that had only partially materialized, and the loan payments on that renovation were the kind of number that kept her awake most nights, though she had told no one that, least of all the clients she still greeted with a bright, unbothered smile every morning. She was, in fact, 6 weeks from a balloon payment she did not currently have the money to make. She did not reach out to Marcus. Not at first. Pride, or something adjacent to it, kept her from making that call for nearly 3 weeks, while she quietly explored every other option first. A second loan, which the bank declined given her existing exposure. A silent investor, which fell through when the man in question did a basic background check on the marina's actual financials. A sale of a portion of the property which would have gutted the operation's ability to function at all. By the time she finally called Marcus's shop, she had run out of options that did not involve him. "Marcus," she said, when he picked up, "It's Diane Castellano." "I remember," Marcus said. His voice was even, unhurried, giving away nothing. "I wanted to talk to you about the marina," she said. "There's an opportunity here, if you're interested. Investment opportunity. I know you've had some good fortune recently, and I thought, are you selling?" Marcus asked, cutting through the pitch before it could fully form. There was a pause. "I'm exploring options," Diane said, which was, both of them understood, a more polite way of saying yes. Marcus did not answer right away. He was not a man who answered important questions quickly, regardless of how the other side wanted the conversation to move. "Send me the financials," he said finally. "All of them. I'll look, and I'll tell you honestly what I think it's worth. That's all I'm offering right now." "An honest look." "That's more than I expected," Diane said, and something in her voice for the first time since Marcus had known her sounded genuinely uncertain. It took Marcus and Rosa, who he brought in as an outside consultant for the financial review, because she had done this kind of due diligence for defense contractors and knew how to read a balance sheet the way Marcus knew how to read a wiring schematic, 11 days to go through everything Diane sent over. The picture that emerged was not a happy one for Diane. The marina was structurally sound. The location was genuinely valuable. The client base was real. But the debt load from the renovation was crushing. The books had been quietly juggled for the better part of a year to keep vendors paid and payroll running. And the balloon payment coming due in 5 weeks was going to force either a fire sale or a bankruptcy filing, whichever came first. Marcus made his offer through a lawyer, in writing, with no theatrics attached to it. He would purchase Castellano Point Marina outright, assume its debts, pay Diane a fair severance based on independent appraisal of her equity, and retain her, if she wanted the position, as general manager of daily operations. Because she did, whatever else was true about her. Actually know how to run a marina well when she was not drowning in a renovation loan. Diane read the offer in her own office, alone, twice. The first time, she read it looking for the trap, because a woman who had spent her whole life around money that came with strings assumed there had to be one somewhere. The second time, she read it and did not find one, and that unsettled her more than finding one would have. She called Marcus directly, instead of going through the lawyers. "Why the position?" she asked. "You could hire anyone. Why offer me a job in the place I used to own after everything I said to you?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Because you actually know how to run it," he said. "What you said to me at that auction, that wasn't about the boat. That was about you having a bad day and me being an easy target. I've had worse said to me by better people. Doesn't mean I hold a grudge over it, doesn't mean I forget it either. But I don't run a business on grudges. I run it on whether somebody's good at the job." There was a long silence on the line. "I need to think about it," Diane said. "Take the time you need," Marcus said. She took 4 days. She called back and accepted, because the alternative was watching a marina she had built with real work, whatever her other flaws, get sold off in pieces to strangers who had never once walked its docks at 5 in the morning to check the lines after a storm, the way she had for a decade. The closing happened on a gray Tuesday in October, in an office that smelled like coffee and fresh paper, lawyers on both sides making the transaction official in the flat. Unremarkable language that always seemed too small for the moments it actually carried. Diane signed last. She looked up at Marcus across the table once the signatures were done. "I owe you an apology," she said. "A real one. Not the kind people give because it's expected. I looked at you that day, and I saw a man who couldn't possibly know something I didn't. That was arrogance, plain and simple. And it cost me nothing that day. But it should have." Marcus nodded once, slow. "Apology accepted," he said. "Now, let's go see the docks. I want to know what needs fixing before winter." That was, as far as Marcus was concerned, the end of it. Not a triumph to be savored. Indumble. A problem to be solved, the same as any other, moved from the open column to the closed one, and then it was time for the next task. The marina, under Marcus's ownership and Diane's continued management, changed in ways that were subtle at first and unmistakable within a year. Docking fees were restructured to be transparent instead of tiered by who the harbor staff liked best. Maintenance schedules were posted instead of handled quietly and inconsistently. A repair bay was added at the north end of the property, run by Marcus himself 2 days a week, because he had no intention of losing his hands to an office chair just because he owned the building around them. Diane, for her part, ran daily operations with the same competence she always had, minus the arrogance that had once come free with it. She learned, slowly, the difference between confidence that came from money and confidence that came from actually being good at something. And she found somewhat to her own surprise, that she preferred the second kind even if it had taken losing everything to teach her that. Marcus kept the old patrol boat. He did not sell it, did not scrap it, did not let the Navy simply haul it away once the housing had been removed and the classified hardware secured. He negotiated, as part of the settlement, to keep the hull itself, and he spent the following spring finishing the restoration the honest way, plank by plank, fitting by fitting, the way he had always intended before any of this happened. He rebuilt her, not as a patrol vessel, but as what she had always secretly been underneath the gutted electronics and the rusted plating, a solid, well-built hull with good bones, worth saving on her own merits, radar system or not. He named her Ellie's Watch. On the day he finally relaunched her, sliding down the very dock that Diane Castellano now managed under his ownership, Ellie stood at the bow, in a life vest, 2 sizes too enthusiastic for the calm water they were motoring into, grinning the way only a 10-year-old given the wheel of her own boat, however briefly, can grin. Marcus stood behind her, one hand steady near the wheel but not touching it, letting her feel the boat respond to her own small corrections. "You did good with this one, Dad," Ellie said, over the sound of the engine. "We did good with this one," Marcus said. Diane watched from the dock as the boat idled out past the breakwater. Arms crossed, not out of judgment this time, but out of something that looked, if anyone had been close enough to see it clearly, almost like respect. She thought, watching them go about the $200, and the laugh she had given so easily that day, and the $18 million that laugh had cost her nothing to make, and had nearly cost her everything to survive. She thought about how she had judged the whole of a man by the price tag on his boat, and how wrong that math had turned out to be. Marcus Webb had never wanted to prove anything to her or to anyone standing in that auction lot the day he raised his hand for $200. He had simply done what he always did. He had looked closely at something everyone else had already decided was worthless, and he had found out, patiently, methodically, without hurry and without apology, exactly what it actually was. That, in the end, was the only lesson in the whole story worth keeping. Not the number, not the marina, not even the quiet satisfaction of watching Diane Castellano learn humility the hard way. Just this: the value of a thing is rarely what it looks like from the dock. Sometimes you have to get your hands dirty, strip away the rust and the resin and the years of neglect, and look for yourself. Marcus Webb had always known that. It just took the rest of the world a little longer to catch up.